concerned. But one thing I am confident of from everything I've read is that this RNA exists. You can capture it, you can sequence it, you can move it to other cells and recapitulate disease. Concerned. But one thing I am confident of from everything I've read is that this RNA exists. You can capture it, you can sequence it, you can move it to other cells and recapitulate disease. Concerned. But one thing I am confident of from everything I've read is that this RNA exists. You can capture it, you can sequence it, you can move it to other cells and recapitulate disease. Concerned. But one thing I am confident of from everything I've read is that this RNA exists. You can capture it, you can sequence it, you can move it to other cells and recapitulate disease.
It's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic. It can't. And there's no reason to discuss this anymore because it's clear. And if it's clear, we shouldn't waste time talking about it. It's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic. It can't. And there's no reason to discuss this anymore because it's clear. And if it's clear, we shouldn't waste time talking about it. It's like Jay said, the RNA can't pandemic.
Actually, JJCouey's insistence, and I think he's right, on calling them transfections rather than vaccines. Actually, JJCouey.
That doesn't look fake, and
we're not pretending to be experts. We're trying to figure it out.
that doesn't look fake, and
we're not pretending to be experts. We're trying to figure it out.
that doesn't look fake, and
we're not pretending to be experts. We're trying to figure it out.
I think there was just something about that doesn't look fake, and
we're not pretending to be experts. We're trying to figure it out.
Right.
Just like all of you are, and we bring a particular evolutionary toolkit that most people don't have, but we'd love for everyone to have it, and we bring particular experiences that happen to mean that we know stuff about science funding and bats and and such that and public health that the so-called experts probably didn't see coming.
Yep. So okay. So I think that.
So the reason I came to this understanding and even approach this topic is because I saw a video in, I want to say March or April of 2020, and it was Dr. Tom Cowan speaking. And in that video, Dr. Cowan was addressing, if you were following a pod of dolphins off of the coast of Florida or somewhere, I don't remember the exact example you used, but if you're following a pod of dolphins and you noticed a lot of the dolphins began dying, what would be your first reaction? And then someone in the audience answered, who put some shit in the water? Mm-hmm. And he was like, exactly. Our reaction isn't to say, oh, what virus is causing these dolphins to die? Mm-hmm. It's who put something in the water. How are these dolphins poisoned? Or maybe their food source was cut off because the food source was poisoned, or they were in an area that was lacking on the food that they needed, right? And that was such a shocking paradigm shift for me, but it made intuitive sense because I was already living in that way. I was like, oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. So it's not that the virus is but then the more that I explored it, because he didn't outright say look, my understanding now that for people who are not familiar with this, if I say viruses as pathogenic disease causing agents don't exist, or haven't been proven to exist, that that statement without the context is shocking. And that's not what I heard. I hadn't heard that statement until 8 to 9 months ago. And I already had a foundational understanding of some of this stuff. So I was like, that sounds so outlandish and crazy, but I'm going to explore it because I'd heard that video from Dr. Cowan and have obsessively explored this basically throughout the entirety of COVID. Yes, these products are poisonous, and we'll get into all that during this episode. But the point that I'm getting at is I try to educate people on the brilliance, the innate intelligence, the ability to adapt, the ability to self-regenerate, self-heal of the human body. Because if you educate people on that while also giving facts related to vaccines, but not doing it from like a fear position, like, hey, you need to be deathly afraid, because we know that fear itself is a great impact, or has a great impact on disease outcomes, the placebo, nocebo effects, psychosomatics, et cetera, et cetera. But if you educate people on the brilliance of the human body, it takes out the need to ever receive one of these products in the first place. Because if you truly understand how miraculous this is the best technology ever created by the creator. Man can only create in the image of that and will always be inferior to that which was created by God. And because of that, this thing is so miraculous. And if you can get people to truly understand it and embody that, their need to ever get one of those products goes out the window in the first place. And of course, it's always helpful to have additional information like, okay, what actually happened with the 1986 NVCIA? What happened with, what are aluminum adjuvants actually about? Is there any safety studies on that? Double-blind randomized controlled trials. We're going to get into all that information here, but that's sort of the position that I've taken. And you can see even the people who have been injured, they have now hope that like, oh, wow, my body is incredible. I can heal from this. Now it's a long road ahead for a lot of those people. Don't get me wrong, but the point is, I think if we can focus on helping people understand that in addition to sharing the information on vaccines, I think it then drops the fear and makes it so, wait, fear is the paradigm that has conditioned me to think I need these things in the first place. Now I don't have any fear because I know how brilliant this thing is. Why would I need to get one of those? I don't need to get any of those. That's ridiculous. And so that's sort of the position that I've taken. I think it's been somewhat effective. And to your other point, this is really cool, full circle. It's actually because of you. So in late 2016, early 2017, I think you had made a post at that time about vaccine ingredients. And I shared it on my Facebook. Just vaccine ingredients, like listed the excipient list and listed either by the CDC or the WHO. I don't remember at the time, but may have been the FDA. But nonetheless, vaccine excipient list. And I just shared it on my Facebook, and this was like my first entry into vaccines. West Point classmate of mine who is going through medical school at the time, few graduates from West Point are able to go to medical school as part of the Army, comments on it publicly and basically shaming me for even questioning vaccines. Full circle moment, and I shared this on my Facebook a few months ago. He has now come around, he's a practicing physician, come around to saying, hey, dude, I got to give you credit. Your work that you've done over the past few years, I've been silently watching, this is paraphrasing, but I have now fully understood exactly what you were trying to get at back then. And I have to say you were right. And it's weird for me to say this as a physician, but you were 100% right. So the point of planting seeds, like I had no clue who was going to listen to what I was saying at that time. But coming full circle, here's a physician saying like, oh no, I now see what's going on. I see the truth of this whole vaccine paradigm. And I applaud you and appreciate you for just continuing to plant seeds and just trusting that they will fall on ripe soil where they need to and then proliferate. And then those people will spread seeds. And that's all we can continue to do on this topic.
Such an obsession of mine that I would be in the office from 9 to 6, and I'd come home and I'd fix a little stir fry for dinner, and I'd run upstairs to my upstairs office, and I would be going through as much as I could find about each one of the vaccines till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, 7 days a week.
Wow.
You know, there were times when I took 2 to 3 weeks off from my clinic practice. I found a little place on the beach, little place on the beach in California, in Encinitas, and I'd go out there for 3 weeks and do nothing for 18 hours a day but research and write about this. I had to rent out studios and,
right.
You know, all those recording
Right.
things and stuff like that. So that's kind of how more and more and more information started to get out there. And now, 25 years, in September, it'll be 25 years since I've been doing this.
Wow.
And it's my whole life, you know?
Yeah.
Because it started, you know, it's like if I'm not sleeping, I'm generally eating, writing, talking, investigating, researching something about vaccines. And I really have stuck with it because it's what God told me to do. I just sat there, just froze. And I just started sobbing because I realized that that's truly what they teach physicians. It's not about all the garbage that's being injected into these little human beings. It's about the defective child that can't stand up from the assault of all this poison. And I was just sobbing. And I just said, Lord, why'd you give me this to do? Why didn't you give me Tony Robbins, go team rah rah? I mean, why did you give me this to do? And I'm just crying and crying. And I heard him say, I heard a voice out loud, and I was the only person in the house, out loud say, because you're willing to do the work. And it's like, I sat there for a second and I kind of looked around and I thought, well, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. So I've never really stopped. And for the first 3 years, I was really angry.
I should also point out that our viewers will have noticed that we are sitting here unmasked. And I should point out that actually we are, in an interesting sense, a model of something that I believe is not on the public radar. So if I'm correct, you, Robert, have had COVID.
I've had COVID and I've been fully vaccinated with Moderna.
All right. Steve, you have been vaccinated.
Fully vaccinated with Moderna.
All right. I am unvaccinated, but I am on prophylactic ivermectin. And the data actually, shocking as this will be to some people, the data suggests that prophylactic ivermectin is something like 100% effective at preventing people from contracting COVID when taken properly. So aside from the risk that possibly the ivermectin I got wasn't real, and I have every reason to think it was, it certainly appears to be the genuine article, I believe that what we have here is a demonstration of a kind of composite herd immunity, where through 3 different routes, COVID, vaccine, and ivermectin, we are protected. And you are... That's one thing I forgot to say on the stream. There are a lot of people analyzing what's going on with Trump, the Trump administration, MAGA, etc., in a vacuum. And, you know, somebody asked me the other day, well, do you regret your vote yet? It's like, I don't regret my vote at all. Do you see who was running? Did you see what the other side did? Right? They tried to run Biden in his decrepit state, and then they substituted somebody else who was decrepit in a totally different way. Like, no, this was the right thing to do. That doesn't mean I'm not troubled by all kinds of features of this. Divide and conquer is obviously going to be their strategy. On the other hand, we have to, you know, in my opinion, you can't let the Epstein issue go, just as you can't let the COVID issue go, because
And then there are people who have inspired a lot of thought for me, people like JJCouey, you know, who's regarded by a few people as, by some people as sort of this kind of savant or idiot or something that whose ideas are just too terrible and too incompatible with the biology that they learned. And in many ways, you know, they are. But that's throwing baby out with bathwater. I mean, the best thinkers in the world all trawl through and suffer through the consequences of 10 bad ideas for every good one, you know, the best creative thinkers. And so if you're going to jump on every one of the ideas that a person comes up with that you don't disagree with, that you don't agree with, and use that as tar to smear the person, I think that's just, you're never going to get ahead in the world yourself. You won't find the muses, the creative inspiration. So I've certainly think that JJCouey's overall take is very good. Over the course of a couple of years, I've come around to a lot of the thinking of Mike Eden, who I initially regarded as being several shades too dark in terms of his worldview. But I've realized the error of my ways or at least the error of some of the error of my thinking when it came to points of disagreement. Fortunately, despite those points of disagreement, we always maintained a cordial engagement.
You know, we have like an 80-year history of giving vaccines by intramuscular injection, and this has never been a problem for any other vaccine, and I just don't see why it would be for these vaccines. You know, we have like an 80-year history of giving vaccines by intramuscular injection, and this has never been a problem for any other vaccine, and I just don't see why it would be for these vaccines.
Hey guys, it's ZDoggMD, VP MD, Vinay Prasad, Marty McCary.
3 M's.
3 M's.
Good to see you guys.
Dude, we're the 3 horsemen of the COVID apocalypse, according to pretty much everybody. We're doing a show. We're going to talk about all things. We're going to talk about therapeutics, boosters. We're going to talk about Omicron. I like to say it, put the accent on the wrong syllable because it sounds more like a Decepticon than ever.
And we're going to talk about why we're sitting so close together. Why don't you start with, he doesn't have a third microphone.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a third microphone.
You know, my supporters fund the show, and they're cheap. They're so cheap.
All these resources.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you guys we're right on being that close, or is this an unboosted contact?
We're unmasked, unboosted, and unrepentant, Marty. That's
Well, I'm an unboosted male. That's my preferred pronoun, by the way.
Oh, is that your pronoun?
Yeah.
Unboosted male?
Yeah.
Secretary Kennedy and Marty and Jay are operating in a very complicated political landscape, and they just don't have the latitude to act unilaterally.
Big financial ties. Probably the worst historically was Paul Offit, University of Pennsylvania professor. Listen to this. Big financial ties. Probably the worst historically was Paul Offit, University of Pennsylvania professor. Listen to this.
This episode is brought to you by Rumble Premium, the home of free speech and exclusive content from the voices that matter. With Rumble Premium, you get ad-free viewing, access to exclusive shows, and premium features across the platform. We're talking about Steven Crowder's Mug Club, Tim Pool's Timcast, Russell Brand's Raw Commentary, Redacted News, and this show. Whether it's breaking news, real talk, or the content that challenges the narrative, Rumble Premium puts you in the front row. Support creators who actually say what they mean and mean what they say. Go to rumble.com/premium door 10 to join today. That's rumble.com/premium/door 10 because truth shouldn't come.
Thing is true. Amongst the people who we now know well, the people who figured out how to think their way through COVID and found each other and became the movement of COVID dissidents, there is a high degree of religious faith.
There is.
It's interesting. And I always took that to imply that there's something about the courage that one gets from thinking, well, there's only so much they can do to me down here on Earth, but this matters in some context they can't do anything about. Mm-hmm. If you have that faith, it probably emboldens you to face down what's frankly otherwise very frightening forms of coercion.
My father wrote a note, a quote from Emerson, where he said, if a single man lands himself firmly on his own ideal and there abide, the whole wide world will come around to him. For 20 years, I've gotten up every morning on my knees and prayed that God would put me in a position where I can end the childhood chronic disease epidemic in this country. On August 23rd of last year, God sent me President Trump. All right. And he gave me...
And then the worst president in the history of our country took over. And look what happened to our country. probably 20 million people. If you want to really see something that's sad, take a look at what happened.
Friend said, turn on your television. Trump has been shot. The thought was, oh my God, what's happened?
He's on top of the roof. Do we need a medic here?
Give me a f***ing hard line. Over here.
It seems that history has pivoted in this profound way. It caused my mind to go into overdrive. What can I bring to bear? Do I have anything that applies here that might steer us in the right direction? I have an audience. My son, Zach, who was the producer of our podcast, and I went out. I sat down on a piece of driftwood, and we started recording.
After the attempt on President Trump's life on Saturday, I did a fair amount of thinking. A number of things had become apparent. First, if President Trump had not turned his head at the exact moment he did, we would likely be living in a very different world today. President Trump dodged a bullet, and so did the Republic. Irrespective of the ultimate explanation for the attempt on President Trump's life, it is quite clear that denying adequate Secret Service protection to President Trump and denying any protection at all to Bobby Kennedy is tantamount to the inhabitants of the executive branch inviting the murder of their political opponents. That would be a shocking assertion if we had also not seen the ruthless weaponization of the courts and the abridgment of First Amendment rights, all in an effort to avoid a free and fair election. Our institutions have been weaponized against the public. Our universities peddle radical nonsense. Our newspapers bend over backwards to avoid reporting the news. Our tax dollars are poured into holes carved in the universe for reasons that are never explained. These problems are dire. They are going to require solutions that are beyond what any one man can deliver. What we need to do is unrig our system and refound the Republic. President Trump, the country needs you to join forces with Bobby Kennedy and name him as your vice presidential running mate. And Bobby, the country needs you to accept. If you run independently and they take you out, they solve a problem from their perspective. If you run together, they only make their problems worse. Our nation suffered a great trauma in 1963 and another in 1968. That pattern threatened to repeat itself this last Saturday. President Trump, by selecting Bobby Kennedy as your vice presidential running mate, you would take a great stride to ending that pattern once and for all and restoring the democratic republic that was the vision of our founders by enabling Bobby Kennedy to carry the torch when you leave office at the end of your second four-year term.
Now, that video did not have the effect that I had hoped, but the response to it was so powerful that I knew I had hit on something. People were hungry for that style of thinking. It wasn't the format that I had hoped and expected, but in some ways, what happened was even better.
Last summer, it looked like no candidate was willing to negotiate a quick end to the Ukraine war, to tackle chronic disease epidemic, to protect free speech, our constitutional freedoms, to clean corporate influence out of our government, or to defy the neocons and their agenda of endless military adventurism. But now one of the two candidates has adopted these issues as his own, to the point where he has asked to enlist me in his administration. I'm speaking, of course, of Donald Trump. In a series of long, intense discussions, I was surprised to discover that we are aligned on many key issues, In those meetings, he suggested that we join forces as a unity party. We talked about Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals. That arrangement would allow us to disagree publicly and privately and fiercely, if need be, on issues over which we differ, while working together on the existential issues upon which we are in concordance. If I'm given the chance to fix the chronic disease crisis and reform our food production, I promise that within 2 years, we will watch chronic disease burden lift dramatically. We will make Americans healthy again. President Trump has told me that he wants this to be his legacy. I'm choosing to believe that this time he will follow through.
Tonight, I'm very pleased to welcome a man who has been an incredible champion for so many of these values that we all share, and we've shared them for a long time. I don't think too many of you people have heard of him. He's very low-key. He's a very low-key person, but he's highly respected. He is a great person. I've known him for so long. For the past 16 months, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Watching the electricity in that room as Bobby Kennedy, a liberal Democrat, stepped on stage next to Donald Trump, and the crowd went wild for it. That told anybody who knew anything about American politics that something brand new was afoot. And watching Donald Trump willing to share the stage with this charismatic character, part of some iconic American story, also said that maybe Donald Trump was in a new place. So the idea of unity was clearly in the air. It was energized. It was ready to be activated. But what wasn't there was something that could take the concept of unity and broaden it beyond MAGA, even beyond Make America Healthy Again. There are many more issues that are part of that coalition, and they all needed to be joined into one thing.
It's been a while since we've done a podcast. I've been busy. But my guest today is one of my great and old friends, Brett Weinstein, and we're going to talk about our big rally coming up in Washington, the Rescue the Republic rally. This rally is a call to the barricades.
This is a new American movement. This is not MAGA. It contains MAGA, but this is much bigger than MAGA.
But you can tell if someone's lying, you know, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie, you know, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar.
I think truth is good for kids. We're so busy lying, we don't even recognize the truth no more in society. We want everybody to feel good. That's not the way life is.
Good morning and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My throat is not in operational condition today, so I am sort of taking the day off, but I'm still streaming and I'm still here. I just want to play this video and let it fall into the context of what we're dealing with here. I think this should be pretty obvious. Just to remind you, it's 2025. I want you to stay focused on the biology. I don't want you to take their bait on social media. I don't even want you on social media anymore. And I want you to try and meet and love your real neighbors again. Biology is definitely the way, and I will be around. Don't worry. This is not the end or something like that. I just need a break, I guess. This is, remember that in 2024, Asim Malhotra was a guest of Steve Kirsch. He's now the advisor for MAHA, and he's been on lots and lots of podcasts. But the very first time that he ever appeared was actually on stage in Stockholm, Sweden in January of 2023 with Meryl Nass, Sasha Latipova, Mike Palmer, Asim Malhotra, and Robert Malone. And I would really like to focus your attention on the talk that Robert Malone gave as an emu farmer and horse breeder and vaccine expert and multiple Skyhorse Publishing CHD author. Let's recall what he focused on in January of 2023.
So thanks. That's a hard act to follow. I want to just thank Asim for covering almost everything that I now no longer have to cover. And what Asim has kind of told you a lot about is what has been done to you. And what I want to talk about is some sensitive stuff, some strong language. And I understand that here in Sweden, these words are might seem very strong to some, but this is the name of this technology. I did not invent this name. This is the technology that's been deployed on you over the last 3 years, and all of us. And at the start, I also want to give a shout out for your nation and for your public health leadership.
So now the most important thing to understand here is that what the main enchantment that Robert Malone is going to engage in here is he's going to describe to you that people are doing something to you. He's going to tell you you have no chance to figure out who it is, and that's because it's him. That's because it's everybody on stage purporting to tell you that you're in trouble, that we're going to rally, that we are going to beat this. Meryl Nass, Robert Malone, Sasha Latipova, Asim Malhotra, Mike Palmer are all scripted international actors working for I don't know who, and I don't claim to know who. But they are scripted traitors to our grandchildren, and it's very difficult to explain it to people until you can really step back far enough and understand that everyone who rises in social media to the point of being in clear view is an already screened, approved, programmed to rise, scripted actor. Saying scripted traitor turns a lot of people off because, quite frankly, it's very easy to imagine why lots of people who've rallied around these people think they're doing the right thing. And I do actually understand that the better that illusion is, the more easy it is to sustain. So if it's only Meryl Nass and Robert Malone that know the full extent of the deception, that's actually better for the team. And so they are scripted actors, but they are scripted actors on an extremely rigid need-to-know basis. And only people like Robert Malone or Kevin McKernan or a few others know all or most of the script. The rest have been purposefully left in the dark about most things and purposely given talking points to focus on during the course of the pandemic. It's a script that gets dealt out, and it is dealt out very meticulously and with intention. And it is very interesting to think that one of the only times that he gave a presentation like this was in Stockholm, Sweden, in January of 2023, exactly when all the murder in America was going to come to a complete stop.
really, to the rest of the world, what happened here was unique. Though there was more of a willingness, even though nothing is perfect, to stay grounded in public health policy, sound public health policy, avoid a lot of the extreme measures that have been propagated throughout the Western world. And it's so easy for us to focus on the bad, but I just want to give a moment and acknowledge the good that's happened here. The rest of the world has benefited from the courage of those that have stood up and advocated for public health policies that did not include a lot of these harsh measures for our children. And I think because of that courage, the world has had a comparator to show that we really didn't have to have a lot of these egregiously harsh policies that have been deployed on all of us. The COVID crisis has revealed a modern battleground in which molding, controlling, and capturing your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs are the objective. I'm going to speak about fifth-generation warfare. As I said, this is not a term that I invented. Fifth-generation warfare is the new battleground, and it has been deployed by military, largely, and intelligence communities on the entire Western world in an amazingly harmonized fashion.
In an amazingly harmonized fashion. Now, what you're supposed to think in this fifth-generation warfare is that Build Back Better was the amazingly harmonized fashion. The killing of African presidents was the amazingly harmonized thing. The messaging about lockdowns was the amazingly harmonized thing, but no, it wasn't. It was the amazing coordination of the skeptical parts of the narrative, the neuro component of the novel virus, the fear and cleavage site, the clockwork-like construction of the genome that included HIV inserts leaked exclusively from an Indian scientist. So what he is doing did to all of us, including me in January of 2023, is bamboozle you into believing that he is a whistleblower, he's on our team, and he is at the cutting edge of understanding how it is that these people have orchestrated the messaging of the pandemic without ever admitting that every person on the stage actually works, most likely indirectly or directly for NATO and the DOD. That's what makes it also so comical that somebody who works for DITRA and DOD is on stage with someone like Sasha Latipova, who now, 3 years later, is pretending to be the one whistleblower on the DOD, that the DOD did COVID with kill boxes. The DOD had nothing to do with putting a whole clown car full of a motley crew of shitheads on the internet that included her daughter before the pandemic, and Laura Loomer before the pandemic, and Alex Jones before the pandemic. This is all one contiguous show, from Alex Jones all the way to the ACIP member 2025, Robert Malone, the hero, the controversial vaccine expert, and also, interestingly enough, author and world touring lecturer on fifth generation warfare.
During the COVID crisis. Fifth generation warfare is a war of information and perception. A strange game. The only winning move is not to play.
But what does that mean? The only winning move is not to play means he's not going to say it, but what it means is you got to get off of social media. You've got to stop following people that social media is trying to convince you with lots of other posts and reposts that these people are heroes. You've got to start evaluating what people say and the actions that they take. And if they can't explain their stance simply and score touchdowns with a few sentences, then these people are just full of it, because it's really very simple. Social media has been weaponized against us, and it's not the programming, it's not the algorithm. It is very specifically actors on a coordinated, need-to-know basis script.
Basic idea is that in the modern era, wars are not fought by armies or guerrillas, but in the minds of common citizens. Your mind is the new battleground.
Your mind is the new battleground is not a lie. It's exactly true. And how they're getting there is with your acquiescence to using social media, to scrolling and waiting for what social media is going to serve you. And the only real discernment we have is that we don't watch shorts and we don't read the ads. That's it. And that's not good enough. You have to use social media with absolute focus and intention on following people that you trust, people that have only earned your trust through a long track record of integrity. Making mistakes is part of being and having integrity. And this person is the absolute opposite of it.
This is not hyperbole. This is standard military strategy. And unfortunately, the United States has led in the West in our response. The European Union has largely followed American leadership.
And so I would argue that in Dutch media and on English media and in French media and in German media, there are planted, scripted actors that are probably coordinated through Robert Malone and Kevin McKernan and a few other lieutenants that can keep this on the rails for 5 good years, even though I don't think they ever intended to have to work this long. I think they already thought they were done here in January of 2023. They were going to now pivot from the COVID narrative to the 5th generation warfare that we've all got to fight here, because he's not going to say a damn thing about mRNA in this talk.
Quote unquote. And in America,
he is absolutely channeling James Giordano, although he's much slower. He is exactly the same kind of actor, and indeed I would say they're equivalent. They are exactly the same role.
The management of this crisis was not primarily driven, the data now show, the documents show, was not driven by Health and Human Services. It was driven by the U.S. Department of Defense and basically the national security state.
And so now the careful line they're trying to walk here with Catherine Watt and Sasha Latipova is that DOD is killing people, and the DOD orchestrated all of this, and the DOD owns all of this, and none of that makes any sense. Because he's telling you right now that that's not the battlefield. We don't do that anymore. The battlefield is getting people to accept a kill box and not even know what it is. To accept their role as experimental animal without even knowing why or what they're accepting. And the people that would be involved in it, if this was a real 5th generation warfare operation, would very specifically tell you they weren't. And in fact, one of the easiest ways to insert a scripted but improvising national security state actor would be to allow them to script them to come out as Epigirl in the SPARS pandemic document, or Robert Malone as the inventor of mRNA.
Stop lying!
Homeland Security domestically, our intelligence community, Department of Defense, the National Security Administration. That's how it came into the White House, and that's how it got delegated and managed. And as often happens, I like to say, when you give a 3-year-old a hammer, everything becomes a nail, and we have this new powerful technology that's been...
That's not the saying. It's not about a 3-year-old. It's about when you only have it. It's such a dumb thing. But that's 5th generation warfare. That's neurolinguistic programming. And very specifically what that is to get your mind to say that. You know, wow, that's not quite how I heard it. That's interesting, because now you're listening and you're paying attention to his words as he says the next words.
Developed and deployed offshore for resisting 4th generation warfare, which is the insurgencies. The United States has lost essentially every single insurgent war since Vietnam that it's engaged in.
It really is important for me to just interject anything that I remember because I don't know when I'm going to remember them again. But I was told by by Meryl Nass that Robert Malone did not know what the WEF was when they went to his farm to vet him in 2020. Let me repeat that. Meryl Nass told me in person the night before Bobby announced his candidacy in Boston. At a dinner, she told me in person that she and Mary Holland had spent 2 days on Robert Malone's farm to vet him in 2020, and when they did, he did not know what the WEF was. And I can't make that story up. That's exactly what she told me. And I guess 3 years later, he's touring the world giving TED Talks about fifth generation warfare that he had no idea. Well, he worked on the Arab Spring stuff before that, but he didn't know who the WEF was.
And it has now tried to transform that battlefield metaphor into what we now call fifth generation warfare. And as they've developed those tools for offshore in information management and PSYOPs, for whatever reason, they determined that it was appropriate to deploy it on their own citizens in the context of what they determined was a national health emergency.
What is he saying? He's saying that they deployed fifth generation warfare, which I'm telling you should be best defined as scripted, on a need-to-know basis, actors on social media that are designed to herd cats and waste people's time to make sure nobody asks useful questions. And if this was a real thing, it would look exactly like him, exactly like Sasha Latipova, exactly like Brett Weinstein, exactly like Joe Rogan, exactly like Steve Kirsch, exactly like CHD, and exactly like Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Which they responded to as if it was a national security emergency. So my goal here is to help you to understand this new environment, the technology that was deployed, and eventually to get to the point that I want to make, which is that those of us that are awake, and I hope that this lecture will help awaken you even more, those of us that are awake can become empowered by understanding this technology and employing it for our side, for the sake of truth, honesty, for spreading the type of information that Asim just shared with you. We're in a new information ecosystem.
So the enchantment that he's casting is that this is AI, this is programming, this is censorship, and it isn't entirely. The main feature that makes this possible is that anybody that rises into clear view is a scripted actor. It's that simple. And I know that that's also sucks because that means that there's nobody on the internet with 1 million followers that you can trust. But that's the reality. The reality is, if you really want to hear it straight from my mouth, I don't know for sure that anyone else on the internet is real. I only know for sure that I am. And I'm pretty sure that most or all of the people that have risen into Clearview are not real. They are fully controlled, fully scripted, and any censorship that occurred at the beginning of the pandemic was designed to make those people feel like they were real themselves. If Brett Weinstein doesn't understand how he's been used, that's better for them. If Shannon Joy doesn't care about how she's being used, that's better for them. If Doc Malik just wants to get paid, that's better for them. There's only one answer that fits all the questions, and that is that it's a coordinated group, and they're all on the same script.
It's a new technology space. And for protest movements, The methods that were employed during the 20th century, centralized leadership, protest movements, is now completely obsolete.
So what is he talking about there? He's talking about putting people in protest movements that are controlled, you know, like, I don't know, those dudes that march around with what looks like a Blockbuster Video outfit on and carrying the flag. I mean, the Patriot Front or whatever. Those kinds of things, you know, like Tim Pool and all these planted sort of operatives that pretend that that's done now. And instead, what we have now are multiple people, podcasters with podcasting and podcast guests, and they're kind of, I don't know what they are. They don't call themselves journalists. They don't call themselves analysts. They just call themselves podcasters. And that's how you can know in a lot of ways that these people are all just frauds. They're all frauds. Most podcasts on YouTube are actually staffed businesses. And yes, this is a sole proprietorship LLC here that last year made $38,000. And I'm managing to raise a family of 5 on that and do this stream a couple, 3, 4, 5 days a week. Because I really think that America is under a spell. We have been attacked. We have been usurped. We have had a silent coup of sorts. And every puppet that has Robert Malone behind them should be in jail, except they're part of the show. It's the same as the Democratic Party or the Republican Party and the agreement about talking about Epstein or not Epstein or how many shooters were there in Butler, Pennsylvania. Once you're in, you're in. Once you understand that it's governance by theater, you don't care what the script says. One part of the script isn't worse than the other if it's all fake, if it's all false. And so it's very easy for these people to just trust the script as it comes and not worry about if they improvise off a little bit or not. They know what to stick to, and they've known for years. That's how we got here. America has been bamboozled.
We have to come, if we're going to win this, and I'm sure most of this audience appreciates that the COVID crisis is just a skirmish. The battle is much, much larger than what we're just talking about here.
Again, what are they clapping about? He's telling them the truth. It is much larger because they are still going. He, 3 years later, is now at the ACIP in America. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, you can see it. You can see it. It's all one show. I need your help. If you're outside of America, I need your help. Share this stream with your American friends. Point it out on social media that Americans need to wake up. Their media is gone. 5th generation warfare, rule by podcast, has been deployed. Rule by coordinated, scripted, need-to-know basis liars has been successful. And you can think of Donald Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as need-to-know basis scripted liars. That's the best way to think of them.
And if we're going to win this battle, we have to understand the battleground. We have to understand their playing field. We have to understand their technology, their strategies, their tactics. We need to assimilate them, and we need to respond to them not by assimilating their ethics, but by deploying technology that's appropriate for this new battle space. Okay, that's where I'm coming from. Precursors to 5th generation warfare. The first accidental 5th generation conflict was Arab Spring. Many people may not appreciate that Arab Spring was employed by the US government to test, deploy some of their new technologies for manipulating thought, behavior, and action. Those key technologies we call social media.
Interesting that he actually just says it out loud again. Social media. So what is he going to argue? Of course, he's going to argue that it's the alternative social media, the free speech space of X. We should fight for it. The free speech space platform of Substack is where he's earning all of his money, where he feels like he's free because LinkedIn didn't work for him and Getter's too gay. And so, you know, that's where he is right now. Malone.news.substack.com. This is the fifth generation warfare. It is social media, and more specifically, it is the scripted actors on social media. And if you think for a second that, and this is where it really burns me, if you think for a second that the red and blue show is one party, then you have to take that assumption all the way to its logical end. There is no election then. Everybody that wins, wins. That's it. They've already closed that off. You have to accept that. And yet none of these people do. You have to accept the fact that all of these dramas and trials and you know, victories in court or failure in court or, you know, arguments about constitutionality are also just scripted bullshit. It can't possibly be serious that the PBS NewsHour did a whole week of discussing the implications of what was going on with the black book of Epstein or not. It's just impossible that that's not scripted if you believe that the red and blue, that it's a high enough national priority that we can't have free elections anymore, and that might go back quite some time. If you actually believe that, then please take that assumption to its logical conclusion and try to work out why this is right then. That it's just plain in front of you. Robert Malone, Meryl Nass, CHD, Andrew Wakefield, Polly Tommy, Mary Holland, Robert Malone, Sasha Latipova, Alex Jones. They're all one national security scripted acting show. Tucker Carlson. You know, frickin' Massey performing with all these Indian representatives. This is all part of the theater. And it is a theater in which other countries participate. Absolutely it is. But it is a theater where Americans lose because we are the audience. We have no control. And the only way we will ever have control is if we storm the stage, get off of social media, leave the theater, and actually start building things for ourselves. Actually start sharing videos by sending them, by hosting your own website. MySpace actually wasn't that bad.
Twitter was intentionally deployed during Arab Spring. Twitter is a weapon. It is not a business. Facebook is...
It is a weapon that, again, you can see we trained it. We are now allowing our children to fall in a trap that we helped optimize. Holy shit.
Used as a weapon. It has intrinsic capability.
But the thing about it is when he says it this angry and he pretends that it didn't help him, that's the fifth generation warfare. When he pretends that it didn't help Jessica Rose, when he pretends that it didn't help keep Peter McCullough and Pierre Corey and Brett Weinstein and Chris Martenson on the top of your feed, then you see what fifth generation warfare is.
When you think to yourself, I've been shadow banned, okay? That language is kind of irrelevant. You're personalizing it. These tools are used to shape the information landscape, the cloud of information, your contacts, who's talking to who, what they're allowed to say, how they're allowed to say it, with specific intentions to shape the direction of thought and emotion. There are tools embedded within that in the analytics that extract emotional content out of every single thing you tweet. and derive from that understandings of what your personal emotional landscape is, and allows that to be manipulated by what you are then exposed to, what your eyes see.
And the idea is, of course, that they're selecting from all the random content on the internet and choosing the stuff that gets them the farthest, you know, with screwing with you or something, or keeps you engaged in their platform. It's real conniving. It could never be that the national security state or something like NATO or whatever global pile of money is doing it would put people on the internet in a coordinated fashion to govern people with scripted actors. But that's what they did. That's who Geert van den Bosch is. That's who Matthias Desmet is. That's who that Dowd guy is. That's who Nick Hudson is. That's who Claire Craig is. That's who Kevin McKernan is. But it's also the clowns like Richard Fleming and Kevin McCairn and Charles Rixey and George Webb, the shithead, and his I don't know, hero of the pandemic, Paul Cottrell. These are all people that were auditioning. And yes, if they caught on in social media, they would be farther. And they would have gotten amplified even more than they have already. But the ones that were already fine-tuned, already well-trained, or past the early auditions, those people rose quick and fast. And they have book deals, and they have thousands of subscribers on Substack. And that is fifth-generation warfare. Now, one thing to realize is that I'm not suggesting that they're all DOD, because the DOD could have also outsourced this to some form of a Palantir third-party kind of thing. So they could work for Thiel, they could work for Musk, and they could be contracted to the U.S. government. They could be contracted to the DOD. I don't know how this works. I just know for sure that this is an elaborate joke on the very audience he's speaking to. And that's what fifth generation warfare is. It's people lying to your face.
Okay? These are weapons. Understand that.
Sasha Latipova, Alex Jones, potentially her daughter, Laura Loomer, CHD, these are weapons, ladies and gentlemen. ICANN is a weapon. Brownstone is a weapon. And the Dark Horse podcast is a weapon, even if they don't understand, because they're dumb as a hammer.
In the case of Arab Spring, it was almost fifth-generational warfare, except it lacked a couple of the key elements. We actually knew who the antagonists were. In true fifth-generation warfare, you do not know who your opponent is. Example, who is responsible for, who's the puppet master behind the COVID crisis as we've experienced it? Who is it?
I'm telling you right now, it's the Human Genome Project and all of their wings in different parts of the world. That's why Kevin McKernan and Claire Craig and Robert Malone and Meryl Nass and CHD, they're all recruited on purpose. They're all part of it. But at the heart of it is Claire Craig and Kevin McKernan, Robert Malone, Mike Eden, all the people on that original paper. And most likely they added Thomas Binder because Thomas Binder needed controlling. But Mike Eden is on their team 100% because he's only been promoting Sasha Latipova for the last year and a half. The one that was on stage just before Asim Malhotra saying it's the DOD. They're so imprecise, they made admissions. They hoped that this video would never show up again. But the entire conference from January 2023 is one gigantic joke now if you watch it. We are under attack, ladies and gentlemen, and we can still free ourselves from this if we really want to. More importantly, we can free our kids.
Anybody here know? Was it Klaus? No. There's something above Klaus. Was it Biden? Was it Tony Fauci? These are all surrogates. Okay? You don't really know who is managing the message that has been propagated on you.
So how useful is he really then? He knows all about it, but he doesn't know who's doing it. He participated in its deployment during the Arab Spring, but he doesn't know who's doing it now. Or he purports to be the one guy who can tell you who's doing it, but he hasn't said it yet.
That's fifth generation warfare. Over the last 3 years, Western governments, non-governmental organizations, transnational organizations, pharmaceutical industry corporations, media and financial corporations have cooperated via public-private partnerships, which I assert is a euphemism for fascism.
Private-public partnerships could also be, for example, the security firm of Gavin de Becker covering Robert F. Kennedy Jr. during his tenure at CHD. When you heard Brett Weinstein say that it wasn't cool that the administration wasn't giving security to Donald Trump or to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., that was kind of bullshit, because he's always had the finest of private security provided for him by Gavin de Becker and Associates, I guess his best friend from childhood. He has been treated to presidential candidate level security by highly trained military professionals since he took over or started CHD, changed the name of the World Mercury Project. It's all one elaborate hoax. It's a national security theater that hides how we are being governed by an elaborate hoax on social media. And COVID was a huge part of the transition to this.
To deploy the most massive, globally harmonized psychological and propaganda operation in the history of the world.
But he's not a part of it. Brett Weinstein's not a part of it. You know, the mother of Soph and her daughter Soph, who was on Alex Jones, is not a part of it. Alex Jones is fighting against it. He's been fighting against it since he went to the Bohemian Grove.
Stop lying!
Okay, over the last 3 years, you have been subjected to the most massive, harmonized, globally coordinated propaganda campaign in the history of the Western world, full stop.
But he's not involved in it. He has nothing to do with it. He's fighting against it. It's the biggest, most invisible, destructive force ever unleashed on our own societies by ourselves ever. And he's giving you a TED Talk, but you're never going to really know who did it. And like a bunch of seals, they clapped. That's how effective the anger is. The anger is part of the neurolinguistic programming. He's pissed because he saw it just like you.
My mouth is getting dry talking about these things.
His mouth is getting dry because he's lying. And he's nervous because this is one of the first times that he's actually gone to the next step. Before this, it was mRNA, and stuff.
I do feel a little passionate. With this campaign, the governments of many Western nation states have turned, okay, this is key, military-grade psychological operations strategies, tactics, technologies, and capabilities developed for modern military combat against their own citizens.
He's showing you that his book is part of it. The truth is right there on your frickin' screen, and he's showing them. He's just not saying it. And by not saying it, the implication for everybody in the room is that this is a good guy, not part of it. Just like Robert Malone and Meryl Nass and Jessica Rose and Pierre Corey were touring the world for the COVID summits because they were fighting against this Goliath.
These are inconvenient facts. The world that many of us believed existed no longer exists if it ever did. For me,
that's a statement of I want it to be. That's an announcement. The world that you thought exists doesn't exist, and maybe it never did. That's an enchantment. That's fifth generation warfare. That's neurolinguistic programming. And think about how deep you are if you believe he's a good guy who came all the way from America and left his horse farm and all of his baby emus alone with some caretakers so that he could bring us the truth in person.
The stunning bookend is this recent revelation on Tucker Carlson that the first thing that I remember as a young person born in 1959, the assassination of John F. Kennedy, was probably propagated in significant part by the United States intelligence community. Okay, and we have been...
So a guy in 2020 who didn't know about WEF is now pretty convinced that the United States government actually killed JFK and RFK. Interesting. I think that's a little off. I think whoever killed JFK and RFK already controlled the country when they were elected and saw no other solution to uncontrollable president and brother than to kill them. Probably the same people who killed Senator Kefauver, who they couldn't control.
Lied about that my whole life. Welcome to fifth generation warfare. The battlefield is your mind.
See, so now he's saying that, the battlefield's been your mind ever since JFK. How about fifth generation warfare is using the mythology of JFK to mess with us? To pretend that some truth is going to come out, that maybe the son of RFK is going to come to our rescue on a white horse. This is 2023, ladies and gentlemen. He hasn't announced yet.
There are weapons. This has been anticipated. We've had a...
Yes, the anticipated rise in all-cause mortality is what this was scheduled around. The rise in all-cause mortality that suddenly Kevin McKernan is acknowledging with his extremely well-trimmed goatee of a beard. And maybe they wanted to protect, they didn't want to pay out Social Security, so they killed some old people. We are winning, ladies and gentlemen. They are scrambling for the exits. They really want to stop. They really want to get off stage, and as long as we exist, they will never be able to stop. This is who Robert Malone and Sasha Latipova and Kevin McKernan will have to be for the rest of their lives. This is who Mary Holland and Polly Tommy are going to be for the rest of their lives. Brian Hooker is going to live as a public fraud for the rest of his life, and it's only going to get worse as my notoriety rises.
Series of writings, and I hesitate to include our own book at the end. I in no way imply that it is of equal to 1984 and Brave New World or the work of Hannah Arendt. It's a continuation in that theme, is my point. Before fourth and fifth generation warfare, modern warfare between states was a duel on larger scale, a continuation of politics by other means with core elements of rationality of the state, probability in military command, and rage of the population, Clausewitz. Okay? The only thing that remains there is the rage of the population. Rational state actors, we're in an environment in which the nation state is treated as an obsolete entity. We have a new vague cloud of globalist leadership that we can't even put our fingers on.
What a weird statement to make from a guy who in 2020, 3 years earlier, didn't know who the WEF was, according to Meryl Nass and Mary Holland, when they visited him at his farm to vet him for CHD. These people are just scripted liars, and they've lied a lot to me. That's the reason why I'm so passionate about it, because they've tried to absorb me and to trick me with so many different groups of shitheads. It's pretty remarkable. And I feel some obligation to make sure that my kids and my kids' generation understand that that's what happened during the Trump administration. That's what happened during COVID. It will be the reason why they are wherever they are in the next 5 years, and whatever happens will be facilitated by this theater. It will be a continuous operation with this theater. because this guy is at the FDA. Those shithead podcasters were at the FDA. That scripted actor named Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is at the head of HHS.
We don't really know who's driving it. Probability in military command, we have an environment in which the military command is confused, it's diffuse, and the battleground is constantly shifting. And today, the very nature of fifth-generation warfare is that it's difficult to define. As Clark says, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
See, that's what they want you to believe, that it's AI, that it's so hard to tell that we're never going to be able to figure it out. But what if it wasn't? What if it was really simple, that everybody in this conference was put there on purpose? They are scripted and they are actors. And now he's telling you that it's the algorithm, it's the programming, it's the emotionality and the selection of emotional things, and then they use them all against you. It couldn't possibly be scripted people traveling around the world lying to you in person. It couldn't possibly be people traveling the world, scripted actors. It couldn't possibly be that.
And that is the fifth-gen warfare battlefield. Now here's the flow of the talk. The thesis is that Western nations have globally deployed military-grade psyops on their citizens during the COVID crisis, and my intention is to convince you of that and to help you to comprehend the inner meaning of that, and then to help you to see how that can be turned to your advantage. We're going to have evidence. A definition of common terms. This is such a bizarre psychological landscape that it's difficult to even process. We have to have language, we have to have common language and understanding to even be able to comprehend what's been done to us.
What you need to hear there is that without common language, you can't understand. And then his job is to make sure that you don't have common language between you and your fellow citizen, between you and the other side of the narrative, between you and people that doubt him. So he's telling you the truth, sort of, kind of, but he doesn't tell you what he's going to do about it, because that's all part of the neurolinguistic programming show.
What is meant by military-grade psyops or fifth-generation warfare? I'm going to give you a video example from the U.S. military psyops so that you have a comprehension of what is being deployed globally. What are fifth-generation warfare strategies and tactics that are relevant to the COVID crisis? This, like somebody made a joke about our book, The Lies My Government Told Me, is nowhere near long enough. It needs to be the size of an encyclopedia. Likewise, strategies and tactics for fifth-gen warfare, I'm just going to give you some examples. Observations regarding organization and leadership in this new battleground, and choosing between being a victim and a warrior. Okay, we do not have to be victims. What are the gradients or generations of warfare? The concept of generation is really not accurate. This is a blend of gradients. In first-generation warfare, we have the ancient battles of Europe, historically, bows and arrows and swords. That was made obsolete by muskets. Then we had organized battle lines, even trench warfare.
Remember that this is supposed to be a multi-year DOD guy who also worked for DITRA at the beginning of the pandemic, screening all of the known nutraceuticals and pharmaceuticals in the FDA catalog using AI and a combination of AI and computer-aided virtual crystallography of the interesting proteins of the virus, and identified 4 drugs that could be repurposed to fight COVID. That guy in 2023, at the end of the murder in America, is now telling everybody about the fifth-generation warfare that they decided to deploy on us because it was a global crisis.
Fourth-generation warfare. That is a mixture of kinetic and psyops, of information warfare and kinetic warfare, and it is still fighting over territory, control of territory in fourth gen. The internet has changed everything.
The internet, and more importantly, social media and the perceived relevance of it, have changed everything. The entire narrative in COVID supposedly occurred and developed and evolved on social media. And everybody agrees that it was Twitter and it was X and it was Elon Musk and it was Substack. And even the PBS NewsHour plugs people's Substacks now. That's not by accident. That's because these new social medias are exactly the same as the old, only more advanced with more features and more machine learning algorithms that are designed to extract useful information from the shit that you put there. That's it. But the main trick is still the deployment of people like Robert Malone, Meryl Nass, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Mary Holland, Brian Hooker, the recruitment of people like Brian Hooker, where you convince them to build a big top tent of health freedom thinking that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will probably maybe get a chance to be president. And so it's better to get to that goal than to save any American kids from a ridiculous vaccine schedule.
As we all know. Now we're in a battle space where the battleground is literally your mind. It is what you think, it is what you feel, it is what motivates you. That can all be manipulated and is manipulated on a daily basis. You experience it, of course, historically.
And I'm not playing that game anymore. I don't want to play that game anymore. I want you to see that there are facts and there are levels of understanding that preclude participating in any of that bullshit. Number one, if you believe that Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are on the same team as I do, then you must take that to the logical conclusion that there's never been a meaningful election in the last probably 12 years at least, if not many more decades, where they have been manipulated to the point of being controlled. There probably have been some candidates that have not been under their direct control, but they did not win. And as we've moved into the era of social media, where the internet has changed everything, that thing that Al Gore invented, we are at a stage now where they are insisting that the internet has already done this. The internet has already made the nation state irrelevant, and that is part of the fifth generation warfare enchantment. They don't want you to think that you should have any control anymore. You don't want you to think that your participation in your own system is worthwhile anymore. You might as well just tweet and post on Facebook and hope it goes viral. Because the internet is actually more important than voting. It's more important than running for office. It's more important than being a county commissioner or the county sheriff. It's much more important that you participate in social media. Even though 10 minutes ago, he told you that that was the military weapon. And that the only way of surviving was to not participate. Can you hear it? It's so contradictory that the only thing you could really call it is fifth generation warfare. Right there in front of you.
Through what we call in the States Madison Avenue advertising technology. Asim was talking about processed foods. This is taking the psychological basis for advertising and manipulation of behavior and thought and weaponizing it against all of us.
And if you were to be honest, what would he be most talking about? The weaponization of podcasts. Like Joe Rogan. And putting the ideas and the questions and the wow moments that they want. And once you realize that all of these people central to the narrative were touring podcast after podcast after podcast in 2020 and 2021, repeating themselves over and over and over again, it's very specifically because that is fifth generation warfare. It is deployed on a need-to-know basis, scripted actors. And it is Mary Holland, and it is Paul Offit, and it is Rasmussen, and Vincent Racaniello, and they don't all have to understand the role they're playing. They can all ideally believe that they are doing the right thing. Then this works the best.
In an industrial way, using this amazing information distribution platform. What's going to displace this? Who knows But right now, that's what we're in. The composition of warfare is changing. The traditional methods of waging war are evolving. Conventional techniques are in decline. Opportunities to use kinetic weapons have become highly restricted. This is why this has to happen. We're seeing it in Ukraine, but for the rest of the world, people are not at liberty to go ahead and engage in armed warfare in the traditional way.
They can't do wet work anymore. It's really hard to kill people like they killed Brandy Vaughn and like they killed Tony Bark. It might be the only reason why I survived my little throat injury and whatever's going on now is because I'm lucky. I don't know. But they can't do wet work anymore, not like they used to be able to because of social media. Because of the potential that my kid might videotape it, or there might be a USB camera they're not aware of. That's the transition that we've made. Is that my neighbor could have a camera that films the car that stops in front of my house for 5 minutes in the middle of the night. And so we have transferred and passed already into this next stage of things where we might force their hand and the only thing they can do is unplug the internet. And when it comes back on, everybody needs an ID in order to use the social media platforms you think of as free. And that's where PeerTube and Soapbox and my maintenance of my own website, my own servers, my own copies of my videos that allow you to download them and put them wherever you want to, including just an audio file, that's where they're in trouble. Because none of these people are advocating for a federated free internet where everybody is minding their own store and we all promote the people that we trust that have built up a track record of integrity and the rest of this be damned. He's promoting social media as the thing that you can only survive by not participating in, and then he's telling you about how it was rolled out, and he's telling you that he can save you from it, even though he is an integral, if not one of the most important parts of the international COVID narrative. Him and Kevin McKernan, for all countries in the world. I don't care where you live, those two Americans should be at the top of your list of traitors against your kids.
They've had to seek newer tactics and tools, such as information warfare, asymmetric warfare, media propaganda warfare, hybrid warfare. That's the new environment we're in. And the traditional clear divisions between combatant and non-combatant and between wartime and peacetime have become gradients. We are all both.
There is no peacetime, there is no wartime, everything is controlled. The internet is the weapon. He's saying it, but then he doesn't follow it to the logical conclusion that nobody that rises to clear view is there by chance, that virality on the internet is an illusion. He's not going to the logical conclusion of the thing he said 10 minutes ago, and that's how you can see that he is a scripted actor.
Both combatants and non-combatants. Everything, the entire landscape has become a battleground. All nation states, everything. When seeking to understand what this means, you're forced to enter this bizarre, shifting, surreal psychological terrain. To understand it, you must temporarily suspend and restructure what you thought you knew about truth, ethics, media, information, social organization, business, government, and the military. Okay, in this total warfare landscape, there are no ethics. When Asim talks about...
There are no ethics. That includes people traveling the world to lie to your face. And if that's all it took, then for sure they would do it, because it's for all the marbles. It's for the grandchildren of Earth. And whether or not they can successfully inherit a mythology of bullshit that will allow them to effectively be converted to experimental animals as a generation. There are no morals, and he's telling you that right now. Have you ever watched a movie? When characters say that, they're usually the asshole. Remember?
What we've been subjected to, all of us have been subjected to. Ryan Cole has been subjected to.
Ryan Cole was there. Holy shit. I did not know that. So Ryan Cole, Sasha Latipova, Meryl Nass, Asim Malhotra, and Robert Malone, and they're all in the same room here. Holy shit.
Okay, there are no ethics. There are no ethical boundaries to what they will do. It is all...
They will launder money with fake followers on Substack. They will launder money by selling fake books on Amazon. There's no ethics here.
All about the utilitarian means justify the ends.
They will start CHD and ICANN and make videos and promote Polly Tommy and Andrew Wakefield for literally a decade because there's no ethics. This is for all the marbles.
Okay? And you have to, for many of us, it's shocking. You cannot conceive of a world in which there are no ethical boundaries. You can't conceive of warfare in which there's no guardrails.
And what is it? Where there are no guardrails, it means that people will just lie to your face. That's the worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is not nukes. The worst case scenario is not deployment of gain-of-function viruses. The worst case scenario is not algorithms programmed really mean. The worst case scenario is not Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. The worst case scenario is people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel flooding the internet with employees.
There's no consensus about the rules of engagement, but that's what we're in right now. You have to completely park any idea.
You mean where you can have Mr. Beast connected to pedophilia, running a multi-million-dollar operation where people from his hometown pretend like they win big games? And it's okay that he's also selling candy to kids? In a place where Sasha Latipova's daughter can make underage content before the pandemic, get promoted by Alex Jones, and then Sasha Latipova can be used by these clowns and nobody makes that connection at all? These people have been training and auditioning and fine-tuning their shticks for years now. And many of them started before the pandemic because they were scripted actors before the pandemic. Knowing, or their handlers knowing, that their role in the pandemic would be absolutely vital.
Idea of justice, right and wrong.
I mean, they work for the same people that Peter Daszak works for. They work for the same people that Fauci works for, the same people that Hotez works for, the same people that Topol works for, the same people that Rack and Yellow work for. It's all the same group of weaponized piles of money. It's not some are Big Pharma, and some are the DOD, and some are the Brownstone Institute, and some is the CHD. Boy, CHD's really punching above their weight. No!
All that is obsolete in this battlefield environment. As you step into this hellscape, set aside obsolete notions of fairness and rules. This is total.
It is totally an enchantment. Set aside fairness and rules. Don't think that if you tweet the right thing that it's going to rise, because people like Robert Malone and Meryl Nass and Asim Malhotra are being programmed to rise, being put in front of thousands of people with a script they already signed at the line and accepted a long time ago.
Unrestricted information warfare, and you've been subjected to it for the last 3 years. 20th century organizational norms and social activism methods based on centralized leadership have become outdated and obsolete. Get rid of them. That's how we lose. We are in a war of information and perception, which targets your cognitive biases, the cognitive biases of individuals and organizations.
But his posing as a homesteading, most interesting man in the world. That's not fifth generation warfare. Mickey Willis, no, he's real. But there is fifth generation warfare. He's going to get around to telling you which ones it is in a minute.
That is the target, to transform those cognitive biases in ways that are in the interests of the opponent, who in ideal fifth generation warfare, you never even know who they are.
And ideal fifth generation warfare, where you never even know who your opponent is, includes CHD, ICANN, Vaxxed, Polytommy, Andrew Wakefield, RFK Jr., Mary Holland, Meryl Nass, Robert Malone, Brian Hooker. That's the truth. Once you understand that, once you see how malevolently we have been played, then you can put the Biden administration in perfect context. You can put the Obama administration in perfect context. We've been played for a long time, ladies and gentlemen. And it's been one continuous joke on the most conservative and Christian Americans, because we are the problematic Americans.
To create new cognitive biases and propagate it out into the population without their being aware that it's being done to them. This is completely different from classical warfare. It focuses on the individual observer and decision makers. It's difficult or impossible to attribute. It is truly leaderless and decentralized, which makes it incredibly powerful because no one can be taken out. The nature of the attack is completely concealed. You never see it coming. What are the characteristics? Ambiguity of the opposing force. I've said this. Ambiguity of the attack vector. You don't know what's being done to you and how it's being done. Dopamine loops. These are the hits that you get on social media. Click, click, click. Oh, they like that. Oh, they didn't like that. Oh, look how popular I am. Dopamine loops.
And they wouldn't be scripted actors doing it. It wouldn't be like Brett Weinstein in a Signal chat for a year telling you that, oh, wow, you make a lot of sense. No. It's just the algorithms and the clickies.
Triggering existing cognitive biases in the targets by choosing words that trigger you in a positive and negative way is how you are manipulated and influenced, how your thinking is shaped.
So it would be really important not to say the word transfection if in fact these were old transfection technologies being renamed to reset the IP clock. It would be really important not to talk very precisely about the ridiculousness of intramuscular injection versus ingestion or even subcutaneous injection relative to the immune system and how it's organized and functions. That would be all crazy talk.
I mentioned Arab Spring before. This was solidified. It was the power of this technology and this approach was clearly demonstrated during the 2016 US election. And now the lessons from that have been deployed worldwide. The 2021 Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So why did they deploy it worldwide, and what did they accomplish by applying it worldwide? What I would argue is they accomplished is the illusion of a pandemic that was most likely from a lab leak that transfection worked for, but not really because we rushed it. He's never bothered to tell anybody in the audience what was accomplished with this never-before-seen level of fifth-generation warfare deployment on the West. Not one endpoint or touchdown has been delineated here because he is a scripted actor.
Conflict was the first example of 5GW in kinetic battle. Don't get the idea that information, fifth generation warfare exists in isolation. It is a continuum, it's a spectrum. You can still have kinetic activities. You still have all the other...
Oh, you mean like killing Brandy Vaughn and giving some kind of transfected cancer to Tony Bark in 2020? Is that what you mean?
Portfolio.
Maybe the killing of some of these AIDS people, maybe the unfortunate, sidewalk injuries that people have, the disappearing, Canadian Chinese people, all that stuff. That's all just, we have kinetic stuff too. Absolutely, we do.
But this is a different battlefield landscape in the extreme. An example of pure fifth-generation warfare is Havana syndrome. Do you remember the people in the embassy in the United States suddenly had these psychological effects, these headaches? Nobody knew where they came from. Nobody knew how it was happening. The State Department denies that it even happens. Nobody knows who did it. This is an example of a perfect fifth-generation warfare weapon. Now I'm going to talk just a moment about sovereignty and what this means. What is sovereignty? Supreme power over a body politic. Sovereignty is what the African states invoked to resist the international health regulations that were being propagated on them last year. Thank God for Africa and Brazil. Sovereignty is freedom from external control, freedom from controlling influence. Okay, now let's think about sovereignty. You know, we talk about sovereign, autonomous nation states. Those are treated as obsolete now.
He was repeating that again.
The World Economic Forum does not recognize that as the future of human organization.
Don't forget, he just learned about the World Economic Forum from Mary Holland and Meryl Nass when they went to visit him on his farm in 2020.
They want a globalist, unelected, centralized command economy, fourth industrial revolution, transhumanism world. And we've all seen that movie. If the unlimited warfare battleground is for control of your mind, thoughts, and emotions, and all rules of engagement or ethical boundaries are obsolete, then what does sovereignty even mean? What is world health when public health policy and pharmaceutical interventions are transformed into just another fifth-generation warfare weapon? I'm blowing it with my timing. Here's the evidence. Militaries all over the Western world have been deployed against us. They're the ones that have been managing all this propaganda we've been subjected to.
But it couldn't be these guys. That's the whole thing you have to hear over and over and over again. He says he's telling you who it is, but he's not really. It's the most extensive, wide-ranging propaganda effort ever deployed, but it's just kind of military. It's a lot of militaries. And what did they accomplish? You don't really know.
What does this look like?
Here we go.
As the world watches and listens in horror, the peaceful pro-democracy demonstration in China comes to a violent and bloody end.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Of course, you've seen this video before. We've watched it before, but he is pretending to be a messenger that's outing the Psy War, is outing there. He's a messenger bringing you the truth, despite this larger than Earth deployment ever before, the largest propaganda campaign ever deployed on humankind, but he's exposing it. It's just the military, the tip of the spear, baby. But it's China. It's China? I don't get it. Is China doing it? Or it's these dudes on horses? Oh no, it's they're oh, those guys, right. Yeah, I see. Wow. All the world's a stage. But
there is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
But it's not podcasts. They've overlooked podcasts. And in fact, podcasts are going to save us. There's a dad podcast that's going to save us. Dad podcast save world, some shit. There's a CEO podcast that's going to save us. The Dark Horse podcast is going to save us. I mean, Eric Weinstein was doing The Portal and he was going to save us. So fifth generation warfare is everywhere. It is the biggest propaganda campaign ever released on, but the podcasters are going to save us. The Substack authors, homesteading, emu breeding, horse selling Substackers are going to save us.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
The ammunition used by Cyborg.
Its mission is to influence the thoughts of the enemy soldier, and at the same time
is expected and encouraged to study foreign languages and the social sciences such as history, economics, and sociology. He must have a broad and sympathetic understanding of all phases of human experience.
Gripping at my skin, the walls of night close in.
I do think it's possible that Ian Carroll is actually going to save us. If anybody's going to save us, it's definitely him because of his mustache.
But the use of this force as an integral part of combat has now taken on new form.
Where is everywhere? Everywhere is the internet, as Robert Malone said. Everywhere is social media.
To say my last goodbye.
You know, the burning television is also, it's the old media being replaced by the new media. And governments around the world are being coerced into believing and accepting this, the new way that the narrative is controlled. Back in the day of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the narrative was controlled by newspapers and magazines and TV channels and that kind of shit. And that control mechanism rebelled against John F. Kennedy and killed him, and later killed his brother. But that was a control mechanism that was already in power, already controlling organized crime in America, already controlling the schools, already controlling a lot of big business. And so, if anything, what you saw from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wasn't a takeover, it was just a brief correction of something that was already on course since the Manhattan Project, already on course since the dropping of the bombs, you see? Already on course since way before. And so once you don't accept the narrative, once you don't want to play along anymore, you are eliminated. And you can hear the sales pitch, right? If they can claim that Arab Spring and Egypt only happened because of them, then they can also go to the national governments around the world and say, look, dudes, you guys are really close to being irrelevant. And so now you're going to have to join in on this little engagement. You're going to have to participate in global governance by social media, or you will be left behind and you will have no actors in the theater. Either you give us a few actors that we can script and go along with this, or we'll do it for you. And you'll have no control and no say. And so they are actually blackmailing governments all around the world, and probably started at the beginning of the pandemic and used the pandemic to convince them that that was indeed the new landscape. That national governments and the national show is effectively being taken over by international social media, run by different oligarchs, then ran the other old media. And so have we seen a transition? Have we seen a little wrestling match? Perhaps. But it's a fighting over 40-60, you know, it's fighting over 55-45. It's not fighting over win or lose. They're all on the same team. It's him. It's him.
Do you understand? That is what we're dealing with. Okay?
Think about how perfect this disguise is. Censored on LinkedIn, risking his career to speak out against mRNA, and now he's risking his life speaking out against this. Is the perfect, the absolute quintessential wolf in sheep's clothing. And he's even got the sheep face with the sheep fur. The nice, you just want to put your hands in that woolly beard. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing with no morals, that traveled the world and lied to people's faces and was amplified artificially on social media. The only way you can survive is to get off and not play.
That is what is being deployed globally. There's some core terms. You have to understand what an OODA loop is. How many of you saw the new Tom Hanks?
You don't need to understand what an OODA loop is. That is the most retarded shit ever.
Movie with the Jets, where they're talking about you have to feel emotionally and act immediately. That's OODA loop strategy. Okay, learn what this term means. Deploy it in social media.
Oh, so you have to use social media in order to win. You have to fight them in their little arena. That's just bullshit. It's patently bullshit. And in January of 2023, more of us should have seen it and exposed it for what it was, but it was just me all by myself. Just me all by myself saying, how in the hell is it possible that Sasha Latipova and Asim Malhotra and Robert Malone and Meryl Nass and Mike Palmer are all on the stage together, and Ryan Cole's in the audience, and nobody sees it for what it is, which is the real fifth generation warfare. Coordinated groups of people on social media and in person lying to your face.
Understand the Milgram experiment and the Ash experiment. These have clearly...
That's true. If you understand what they are, then see why it is that Meryl Nass, Sasha Latipova, Robert Malone, and Asim Malhotra all on stage together could easily be exactly these, experiments enacted on an audience. That podcasts are exactly that, enacted on their audience. They are podcasts, and social media podcasts and podcasting and discussions are all weaponizations of these two principles. Especially the Ash experiment.
Demonstrated the ability to manipulate the human mind and human behavior in ways that are far beyond what we assimilate within our own souls as what we would do, and yet we will. Understand lockstep. Discussed in a 2010 Rockefeller Foundation report, lockstep was the idea of using a pandemic to impose tighter top-down control modeled after the Chinese social credit system. This is not a conspiracy theory, folks. This has been planned, discussed, and deployed.
He just doesn't want you to know that him and Kevin McKernan have been at the table for years already. The former research and development director of the Human Genome Project, an ultra shithead in my own timeline, Kevin McKernan. They just won't tell you, but it's absolutely positively true, and I'm betting my family on it.
Understand what the Five Eyes Alliance are. This is fascinating. When you think about the landscape right now.
All the countries that he traveled to, you mean? All the countries where all these shitheads on social media are from? Those Five Eyes? I see.
And think about what has been the most egregious deployment of totalitarian measures in response to the corona crisis. What are the nations that come to mind? Australia, Canada, New Zealand. I argue that all three of those are now captured client states of the World Economic Forum. They're no longer functioning as autonomous.
He's so smart. He says they're not even working anymore. They're just puppets. Wow. That's some controversial shit, man.
National entities. The United Kingdom and the United States. What ties them together? The Five Eyes Alliance. This security consortium. Okay?
Don't forget that Robert Malone's wife is Jill Glasspool Malone, and her dad was actually UK intelligence. Wah wah. Hey, Mikey Mikester.
Share data among each other, and when they are prohibited from acting against their own citizens, they have reciprocal arrangements so that, for instance, MI5 acts against United States citizens, CIA, NSA, and other US agencies act against UK citizens. This is this reciprocal Five Eyes alliance. It is the most powerful intelligence
So he's telling you what Campbell does and what Doc Malik does and what Jonathan Engler did and what Nick Hudson does and what Claire Craig does and why it's really nice to have Claire Craig have her accent, or why it's really nice for these English guys to do podcasts in America and vice versa. That's why some of these people were on Australian news and not American news, because it's all one coordinated show and he's at the head of it.
Organization in the world, and it's largely dominating global.
Quite frankly, I think when he was told to spin his team up at the beginning of the pandemic, that's what he did. He spun up a team of narrative control coordinators that could script people on social media.
Politics through exactly the type of strategies and tactics you just saw with that film. Okay, these people are trained to manipulate your mind. Now I'm going to skip this one. This is a clip that just shows how actively my Wikipedia page was manipulated. But what's fascinating about that is if you track back and look at who did the manipulation, it's a sock puppet. And the sock puppet appears to be closely allied with MI5. Okay? The same sock puppet manipulated Pierre Corey's virtually every page having to do with the use of ivermectin on Wikipedia.
Can you see the disguise here? He's supposedly giving away that MI5 was manipulating Wikipedia, both his and Pierre Corey's. And so that means that him and Pierre Corey must be good guys, just like Sasha Latipova and Meryl Nass, Hanasim Malhotra and Mike Palmer, who he shared his hotel breakfast with. Holy shit.
Same people did it, same organization. The Overton window, okay? The range of policies politically acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time is known as the window of discourse. Fifth-generation information warfare methods seek to actively manipulate the Overton window to constrain what we are allowed to talk about.
Oh, interesting. You mean like talking about whether it's a natural virus or whether it was a lab leak, but accepting the premise that it's novel? Shall I repeat that? You mean arguing about whether it's a natural virus or a lab leak virus while accepting the premise that it's novel in either case? Is that what you mean?
That's when you talk about gaslighting and these various techniques, the manipulation in the media, the redefinition of language that's used, right? Vaccination is no longer vaccination. An anti-vaxxer is anybody who is against mandates. Okay, this is active.
An anti-vaxxer is somebody who's against mandates? That's exactly the grift of the big top tent of health freedom that CHD is. He's actually reciting the bullshit. Do you see it now? How thorough this was done? How well it was planned? How nicely orchestrated it was, and how he's not actually telling you it, but he is? It's him. It's CHD. It's ICANN. It's the Brownstone. It's FLCCC, now IMA. It's the American doctors. It's all of them.
Manipulation of the Overton window, that's how it's done. What is acceptable political discourse? The Dunning-Kruger effect is employed on a daily basis. People have a tendency to think they're smarter than they are, that they're more competent than they are. That is a tool, a weapon, an opportunity.
And every once in a while you get somebody who's not. Like me. Who screws it up for all these people, who doesn't buy in, who doesn't go along. And they made a mistake, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not supposed to be in that book, so you gotta buy it. You gotta scare them. I think that CHD would be terrified if that book started to sell. They would be terrified because that book is actually evidence that for a time, this show, this national security actor-governed show, was trying to absorb Jonathan Couey from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They started with Piper Stover, then they moved to Brett Weinstein and Alexandros Marinos and Chris Martenson and Heather Hang. Then they moved on to Matt Crawford and to Steve Kirsch and to Kevin McKernan and Jessica Rose. Then they moved on to Panda and Nick Hudson and Jessica Hockett and Jonathan Engler. Then they moved on to CHD and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on and off for another year and a half. And then finally they gave up. But it was already too late because I shouldn't be in that book. It should be Charles Rixey, like Kevin McKernan said on the Danny Jones podcast in November of 2024, as an attempt to correct the narrative. You know, make up for the fact that they shouldn't have printed my frickin' name in the book. It'll be very curious when that name disappears. The Wuhan cover-up is one of the biggest pieces of evidence that says that this is all one malevolent fifth-generation warfare show that scripted Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Mary Holland, that scripted ICANN and Del Bigtree, that probably scripted Barbara Lowe Fisher and that whole group of people. Definitely that killed Brandy Vaughn and Tony Bark.
Frankly, if you want to operate effectively in this space, I argue you have no other alternative other than humility. You have to acknowledge your ignorance. I am profoundly ignorant about what is going on here. I have been ignorant all the way through. It's been a journey to discovery, and every day I learn something new, and every day I find out about my own cognitive biases.
Remember this slide. Remember the slide. Remember this slide.
That doesn't look fake. And
we're not pretending to be experts. We're trying to figure it out.
That doesn't look fake. And
we're not pretending to be experts. We're trying to figure it out.
That doesn't look fake. And
we're not pretending to be experts. We're trying to figure it out.
That's fifth generation warfare, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to really say it so bluntly, but that's fifth generation warfare. Tomorrow, I want to cover this a little further by delving into, I was going to play music, but I don't have the voice to do it. I want to delve into this. So let me just play this video without Mike barking in the background, and then let you know that I want to use Brett Weinstein to break this. I think Brett Weinstein and Robert Malone can be used to break this rule by podcast illusion for Americans, and maybe for a lot of people in the West. And I really think it's possible because they are over their skis and they are not following their assumptions to the logical conclusions that they lead to. That's why they still haven't figured out that intramuscular injection is just dumb. That's why they still haven't figured out that RNA can't pandemic. That's why they still haven't figured out that this is old transfection technology being recycled and renamed to reset the intellectual property. Because they are scripted not to. And Brett Weinstein is one of the worst, and it can be seen in his last podcast. Download it, watch it, study it. The illusion is about to be broken.
The implications of those two versions of history are radically different. In one of them, the country got a new president and moved on and healed, and it doesn't mean that we are restored to what we were, but at least we know what world we live in. We live in a democracy, and things ebb and flow between our two parties, etc., etc. On the other hand, if 1963 was a coup, if somebody took out President Kennedy and thereby installed their own power structure, you don't know what world you live in. Do you live in a democracy, or do you live in a country that has experienced a coup and pretends to have a democracy by having elections?
I want you to just think about something for just 1 second because it bothers me very much. But his father worked in the Department of Justice of Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s dad. So suggesting, see, he survived the killings. You know, he didn't die like Estes Kefauver. He didn't die like John F. Kennedy. He didn't die like Robert F. Kennedy. Les Weinstein served in the Department of Justice during the modernization of the FDA and lived through it, unlike John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Estes Kefauver. And yet somehow or another, this guy is claiming to shed light on some organization that decided to off the Kennedys. Doesn't mention Kefauver and doesn't mention that his dad was actually in the frickin' government when that happened. That's no big deal.
That do not actually shift power. Those are such fundamentally different versions of America that not...
So in one version, some scary black op killed Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and from that moment on took over the United States. Wasn't something that existed beforehand and was briefly having problems with the Kennedy family. No. It was something that before that everything was fine, and then it took over by killing Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy while his dad was in the Department of Justice as an IP lawyer. I'm not making it up. It's just the way it is.
Being able to resolve between them is paralyzing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, but that's only two universes, right? That's two universes where you don't know what kind of country you live in, a democracy or a cryptic...
Are you hearing you're about to hear, if you haven't heard it already and felt it, a very similar description to fifth generation warfare that Robert Malone told us 3 years ago on a stage in Stockholm, Sweden with Sasha Latipova, Meryl Nass, Robert Malone, Asim Malhotra, and Mike Palmer.
Authoritarian structure over which you have no democratic influence. What I suspect is about to happen is that the Cartesian crisis, which I've described many times, the Cartesian crisis is the state in which your certainty over what's taking place is low quality, right? Did COVID come from the wild? Did it come from a lab?
It's exactly what, again, right, was the whole idea of social media, was to create the world where nobody could be certain of anything, exactly what Robert Malone said. And then the problem is that you can't, we are so uncertain you don't realize that it is Brett Weinstein who is a scripted national security actor, that Alexandros Marinos is a scripted national security actor, that Chris Martenson is a national security actor, that Robert Malone, Meryl Nass, Mary Holland, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and all of them are national security actors. Podcasts are going to save us.
Are the vaccines safe and effective? Are they highly dangerous gene therapies that have been disguised as vaccines to get you to take them? You don't know what to believe across many different topics. And this is largely downstream of the fact that much of what we come to understand about the world is now intermediated by screens and authority. Some authority comes up with some conclusion. You are fed that conclusion through some screen. You don't necessarily know what you're seeing. Are we a planet that is regularly being visited by aliens? Or are we a planet in which some powerful group or groups would like us to think that that's what's going on? We don't know. So we have to hold both possibilities open. And the problem is that
you don't, though. You don't have to hold all stupid possibilities open, but you do if you have acquiesced to using social media to figure shit out. If you haven't followed Robert Malone's advice and just not play the game, then yeah, you're kind of screwed if you use social media to figure it out. And the worst part is that this guy is part of the reason why you will never figure it out. He is an employee. He is a national security scripted actor on a strictly need-to-know basis. Just like Robert Malone, although Robert Malone knows a hell of a lot more.
For each one of these things, you are effectively defining, you are doubling the number of universes you live in, right? So you've got the Kennedy assassination was a coup versus the Kennedy assassination was a tragedy that left democracy intact. That describes two universes. In both of those universes, you have a question about whether or not aliens regularly visit the Earth, or somebody wants you to think so, but it's a psyop. Okay? So that's 4 universes. Each time you have one of these unresolved questions of major import, it doubles the number of universes that you have to keep alive so that you can plot your course. You know, if it turns out that it was a coup, but the aliens are real, then what do I do, right? Now, the punchline here is that AI is about, within the next year or so, going to be capable of producing compelling video evidence that will not be detectable. It's getting better all the time. It's already sufficient that, you know, even an animal behaviorist like you or me will sometimes see it.
They are animal behaviorists now. Not only are they evolutionary systems, something complex systems people, but they're also animal behavioralists. That's awesome.
A video of a creature that we don't know, and it's a little hard to know whether or not that's a real creature. You know, I would say I'm at about 4 in 5.
I'm still not convinced that AI is making any of these videos. I'm still just not convinced that it's not a machine learning algorithm that has been manually trained by thousands of Indians that are all using Photoshop and Illustrator. That to me is the most logical conclusion, that they took AI and a machine language learning, you know, whatever, large learning algorithm, some kind of language learning model, and trained it with thousands of talented Indian artists that said, you know, this is what this looks like, this is what that looks like, and they did it for years. And now they have something that can produce some shit, and now we're supposed to start training it again. But this is all an elaborate hoax, because it doesn't matter. And it would be much less effective than just putting coordinated liars on social media and pretending it was AI. Pretending the danger is AI, pretending the impending doom is AI, and the impending trapdoor that's closing is AI, rather than the trapdoor already being closed because you've accepted Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Robert Malone, Peter Daszak, Tony Fauci, you know, Massey and Johnson and frickin' the Weinstein show.
Examples. I can usually spot it, but at 4 in 5 is not as good as I would like it. And within a year, maybe it'll be 1 in 5 that I'll be able to be sure. At some point, 2 years down the road, I won't be able to be sure at all, because the AI will be refined enough to know what a plausible creature looks like, and it will be able to therefore create creatures that if you don't actually have experience with them, you wouldn't know one way or the other. So, point is, that is going to create, first, a radical increase in the rate of proliferation of cognitive universes that we are forced to keep alive. And I suspect that the immediate consequence of that is going to be paralysis. That the number of different combinations of possibilities where you cannot resolve, you cannot get closure and say, I think I live in this world, and so I'm going to ignore all of those possibilities over there and go forward as if this is true. You're basically going to become agnostic about just about everything. And so in this mental multiverse, you will maybe be able to avoid embarrassment by not putting your weight on any of the ice, but you can't accomplish anything in that state. And that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, he's not concerned about it. He's employed to make that happen. He and the intellectual dark web have been deployed to make that happen. Robert Malone, CHD, the Brownstone Institute, Independent Media Medical Alliance, these have all been deployed to make sure that the number of social media multiverses is ever expanding, instead of simplifying it down to, you know, old technology lied about shitty ideas like intramuscular injection being really just dumb ideas from the 1800s. It's not that complicated. People got it wrong and went with it for a long, long, long time. We're going to break this illusion like a rock with a great big hammer. And this was just the very, very start of the hammering that I'm going to do in the month of August.
We are going to be collectively put into a circumstance where everybody will be afraid to assume enough about the world to actually be capable of acting rationally towards it. And that's a very frightening prospect.
Yeah, it is. It's terrifying. And it does point to the need for actual physical interactions with the world and with people, and to work hard to decrease the percentage of the interactions that you have that are mitigated by screens, that could be mitigated by AI, whether or not you know it. That when you are in the physical presence of another organism, be it human or otherwise, that is doing something, at least now, that is not, and your sensory biases exist, and you and I could be watching the same thing and see something different, but what we saw was real if it was, a fox on the ground doing something. And it is not mitigated by AI, whereas nothing coming through the screens at this point. And you and I are having this conversation. Jen's in the next room. The three of us know that we're here doing this. Our dog's on the floor behind us, but none of the tens of thousands of people who will listen to or watch this can know with 100% assurance that you and I are actually here doing the thing that we're.
And so what she wants you to believe is that you don't know for sure because AI is so good. You don't have to worry about her husband or her being on a national security prioritized script. You don't have to worry about that at all. What you have to worry about is making sure that you can still tell the difference between a real video and one that would be faked.
Stop lying!
Right. But you can tell if someone's lying, you can sort of feel it in people. And I have lied. I'm sure I'll lie again. I don't want to lie, I don't think I'm a liar. I try not to be a liar. I don't want to be a liar. I think it's really important not to be a liar. But you can tell if someone's lying, you can sort of feel it in people.
I'm going to try and say this without crying, but my family's coming home tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. God, I miss them.